Hi everyone, on here coming to you with this month's video, and I want to delve into kind of a big topic. It's interesting how this overlap kind of came about. So today, or this month, I'm going to be talking about implementing compassion when we are irritated by others. And I think this is kind of a hot spot in our world today, really. I mean, this has come up a few times in my study sessions with people, and people have been dealing with, and of course, as tensions build in the world and things like that, then um, this is something that naturally will surface these irritations, but it's attached to so much more than that. And before I get too far in, I do want to mention, by the way, my work is based here. And if you want to learn how to maneuver life on Earth, deal with everything that happens right here, the code journey. This is the 2023 edition. I just released 2024. Um, and so that is exciting. That's out there. That's available. By the way, you can find that on my website, compassioncodes.com. Go to the goods tab and look under the code journey, and it will have links to get you directly to the purchase pages. If you want to check it out before you purchase, you can go in and look at the ebook section. And usually around the end of September, I go ahead and mark down and make the ebook for free. So you can also watch for that. Right now, it's at a really discounted rate. If you want to go ahead and pick it up now, or you can wait until it shifts over. But that's a great way to explore the work and then see if you want to purchase the book going forward. And the study sessions are great, just conversations that we have about pretty much anything and everything and what's happening for people and how the codes are connecting for them and all of that. But these life experiences that I do really are in these videos about addressing things that people are dealing with and addressing things based on what is coming up in those codes. What are the energy patterns and the currents that are present for us, that are active at a given time? So I start to blend those together and see, and that's how I get into some of these topics. And I think it's so valuable because really, we're always going to have challenges on Earth. That's not going to stop. That's not going to go away when you're working in a third dimensional platform, so to say. I mean, we might be five dimensional or whatever other dimensional beings, but we are living in a third dimensional world, and that is going to have challenges with it. And that's going to test us, and that's going to bring stuff up in us that we need to deal with. And so, this work, a lot of times, it helps us to live a little more compassionately and helps us bring in those principles of compassion to face these things that we're dealing with. So when I see these things come up, I like to address them. I like to bring them to the surface. I like to bring them out. I like to share my thoughts on them, my experiences that I have, the wisdom that I can give out there for people. And hopefully it helps you in dealing with something with your own life, or maybe it just creates a little light bulb that goes off and makes a connection for you. And then you're like, oh, well, that kind of makes a lot of sense in there, and then helps you through something. And that is always the hope. That's always the hope with these videos. So what I want to look at is kind of break down these components about irritations, about compassion. Why do we use it? Um, and does it really make a difference when we're working with other people? And how do we deal with these irritations? Because it seems like that's coming up for a lot for people. And there's a lot of different pieces, from expectations to growth to all kinds of things that kind of play into this topic. So when we start to deal with these things, what happens a lot of times is we might be growing in our path, in our process, and we're sitting around, and people we've maybe gotten along with for a long time or have known for a long time, and maybe they're not growing as much as we are, or maybe they just have things going on in their life, um, and they start to irritate us. And it's usually small things. It's like a married couple. It's like the honeymoon's great, the first couple of years are great, and then all of a sudden every little thing starts irritating you in there. And it's not so much that the person's really actually doing anything wrong, or that they've changed. Sometimes they've changed, sometimes they haven't. But all of a sudden, these things are irritating us. And I think we have to look that there's a lot of variables and components in that. We have what's happening in our world, so we're naturally more stressed. We're naturally living more on the edge of things, maybe more in a survival mode. We feel like we don't have time to deal with things. Again, a lot of times when people are making accomplishments in their path and their progress, then they start becoming irritated by people who aren't at the same point that they are. And that doesn't make somebody better or worse. Again, we're all at these different points, and we may have mastered one thing, somebody else has mastered another thing. Just because they're not seeing something the same way as us doesn't mean that they're less than us or not as evolved as us or things like that. Certainly there are cases where people haven't spent as much time getting experiences or been through things. But these days and times, one of the things that really plays into the irritations is linguistics. People get very hung up on words that's like, oh, well, they're using this word, so that means this, and that means they're arrogant, or that means they're controlling things, or that means they're insecure, or whatever it means. I mean, there's so many different ways that we can go with this. And so if we stop and look at things, I think one of the first things is we want to stop and look at things and say, is this person really doing anything per se wrong? Are they doing anything wrong? Maybe they are just unaware of something, but most of the time it's not so much that somebody is doing something wrong, it's just that all of a sudden it's irritating us. And that's where we want to come back and take a look and say, well, why is this irritating me? Why is this an issue for me? And there can be, again, a variety of things. They might be carrying some heavy energy. They might be going down a path that's got some dark energy to it. And that is creating some resistances for me. I might be growing and now I'm seeing things that other people aren't seeing. And all of a sudden I want them to be where I'm at. And this is the thing. This is like kind of, when you're an adult and you're a parent and you're going through parenting things and your kids start to grow up, right? And you forgive a lot of things when they're younger because it's like, well, they're kids. They're just kids. And and then all of a sudden it's like you make an accomplishment and you make a breakthrough, and then all of a sudden you want that child to be where you're at. And it's like, well, wait a second, that child is 30 years younger than you, or however many years younger, and you all of a sudden want that child to be where you're at. And life doesn't really work that way. And, we can't hold those expectations on people. So we have to stop and really consider it. I mean, first of all, if we look at kids, and people, in their 20s or the younger generations out there. And that's not to degrade them or mean that they're less. I'm not saying that, kids. But if we start to look at them, in some ways, they've been pushed so much more into adulthood, so much faster than, say, my generation, those of us in late 50s or 60s or things like that. And they're being expected to grow up a lot faster. They're dealing with a lot more. They've had a lot more chemicals in the environment, in what they're issued at school so that they can go to school, and medications and programming. I mean, just the state of the world. They've had a lot more to deal with than people that were born 30 or 40 years ahead of them. And we sometimes forget this. And we think, well, they're at a certain age, so all of a sudden they should be mature, they should be thinking about all of these things. And yeah, that's great on one hand. And on one hand, actually, the 20-somethings do think more about those practical things than people older than them did when they were that age. Because people that were, older than them that grew up in certain generations, the 50s, 60s, whatever, some of them were practical, some of them weren't. They were too busy partying and enjoying life and doing drugs and, Woodstock and these various things. And, they weren't necessarily living responsible. They were living their life. And so we need to stop and consider these things and to look at it and to remember that a lot of people are trying and they are on their path. And also these days, one of the things that comes up is that we are dealing a lot with online communication. So we don't actually get that face-to-face connection with somebody. In the past, everything was more face-to-face, and now so many things are virtual. So it's much easier to take something that somebody has said and blow it out of proportion. Or even if you get on a phone call, like in my study sessions, we have people, they come on, they talk, but all you're hearing is a voice. And we forget that sometimes, like a voice has all kinds of different tones, and those tones can literally trigger emotional reactions in people. And it's not that somebody can necessarily change their voice or their tonation. I mean, there's some aspects they can change, but there's some that they can't. Some people have high-pitched voices, some people have really deep voices, some people have middle ground voices, some people use a lot of inflection, some people are very monotone when they speak. So all of these things can create triggers. And we develop impressions about people. We develop judgments about them. We develop um, ideas about who they are and what their beliefs are based on these tonations or based on these words that we see. And, once we start to go down those paths, those will generate irritations. And it's not that anybody's done anything wrong or that they are doing something bad or any of that. It's just the judgment that we've made. And I've learned, because when I travel, I get a chance to actually meet people that I interact with online. So I might have met them through social media, but then I meet them in person and there's a whole different vibe there. Or they might be on my study session call and I get there and I meet them in person and there might be a whole nother layer or a whole nother vibe that I would never pick up from the phone call or from the study session. So I think that these, again, are pieces that we have to keep in mind. Now, some people in, my sessions and stuff, or that I communicate with, and they will come back and they say, yeah, but this is a person I've known for, 15 years or 20 years. And this is a person that, it just really irritates me. They're becoming really irritating to me. And it's not so much that they've changed or done something. But here again, this comes back to this expectation of, we get these expectations. I've grown, I've developed a skill, I've mastered something, I've moved past something, a thought, a pattern that I thought was right, and I now realize it wasn't right in there. And so here again, we have this expectation of that person being where we are at. And it's kind of like when you learn the truth about something, right? We have a lot of that in today's society, right? You learn the truth about something and it's like all of a sudden you expect everybody else to know that truth as well. And there's a lot of people that maybe don't know that truth in things. This is where compassion comes in, because compassion helps us to work through these growth processes. And we have to make those decisions, and we have to come back and realize that the irritation comes because we're maybe focusing on something that that person is going through, a lesson, an experience, or something they are doing. And it is reminding us and showing us that, hey, actually, we did this too. And maybe there's something we haven't completely cleared in relation to that. Or maybe that was a really rough period for us to get through. That lesson was really hard for us to get through. And so when it comes up in somebody else, all of a sudden now we're getting irritated over it. But the reality of it is we're focusing on them and not us. And oftentimes these irritations will come up if we pay attention and we stop and look at things. They will come up to us because we are experiencing some sort of pain in our life. We are experiencing something that we don't like. People are not behaving in our life the way that we would like them to behave. And that's where we have to stop and question ourselves a little bit and say, hey, I need to come back into me. I need to pay attention to what I'm doing. And I need to worry a little bit less about what some of these other people are doing. It's one thing to be aware, it's another thing to allow ourselves to become consumed by it. And here's where we can break down some of the code pieces of things. So, what does compassion really do? Compassion in codes is connected to lessons, experiences, being able to support successes for other people, as well as our own, because we need to have compassion with ourselves as well as other people. And that compassion is an aspect of teaching and learning. So, when we bring compassion into a situation, when we implement and use compassion in a situation, we are actually teaching people how to be successful without having to come down and say, hey, you're being an ass. Could you stop doing that? And I want you to be this way, or I want you to be that way. And we have to realize we don't get to dictate how other people be. We can make a request and say, hey, when you're around me, would you mind this or would you mind that? That would help me out a lot. It's just like, if you have challenges expressing things or if you have a hearing issue, let's use a hearing issue. I have hearing issues. Okay. So if I'm around people, I might maybe make a request when somebody I'm still getting to know people, or even if I've known them for a long time. Hey, my hearing doesn't work quite right. Do you think you could be more in front of me instead of behind me? Because I don't hear you when you're behind me, type of thing. So it's no different than that, really, in many ways. And coming back and also being accountable for me, right? Because part of being compassionate to them and me in to minimize some of the irritations is to say, okay, one of the compassionate things I can do is to be attentive, get in front, look at somebody when they're talking. And what does that do? If I have a hearing issue, for example, then I can see what they're saying, and it's easier for me to pick up what they're saying in things, and I'm present with them. So I'm giving them this unconditional attention, in a sense, to it. And these become very important. So it turns into this learning experience. It's about embracing the learning experience that comes with interacting with other people. So once we start to do that, we can minimize it and we bring our focus back on to what am I giving out versus being distracted by an annoyance that usually is nothing wrong. It's not a wrong thing. And we have to remember, we want to remember, I should say, we don't have to, but we want to remember this aspect that we've all gone through learning processes. And imagine if nobody had any patience with you, if everybody just got irritated with you because you were trying to learn something or you were in a learning phase, even if you couldn't see you were in a learning phase. What is the difference between somebody getting upset and saying, I'm not going to have anything to do with you, and somebody being caring and compassionate and operating with kindness, even when you irritate them, so that you can move through those lessons? And people do move through the lessons, they do move through their phases and many times faster with that kindness. Again, it doesn't mean that you break your boundaries or lose your integrity in the process or any of that. You don't let them take advantage of you, but you do show kindness, and that kindness becomes remembered. That kindness is teaching, that compassion is teaching, and sometimes compassion is saying no to somebody. Sometimes compassion for yourself is saying, hey, I am not in a great space to deal with this right now or today, so I'm not going to be in that space with that person, or I'm not going to indulge in interactions with that person. And then you say, okay, but another day I'm feeling stronger, so I will, and I will put this forth. And it is patience. It is patience. It's just like a parent. You've got to be patient for that child to grow up. You can't force them to grow up. You can't force them to know certain things. You can't force them to be responsible. We can want that. We can hope for that. We can desire that. And yet we can show them the compassion as they're making the mistakes, as they're going through their challenges, as they're stumbling in life, and say, okay, so you learned from that. Now let's pick up and let's go and take another look. So this this unconditional love, forgiveness, these are all things that are coming up in our September energy. and they're all things that are on the forefront. And that energy is calling us to stay focused on our accomplishments, stay focused on the positive movements, and reinforce those things. It is a reminder that we are going to be remembered for our actions, and our actions do have an impact. So when we meet somebody with compassion, even when they irritate us, even when they're in a bad mood, we are giving a gift to them. We are giving a gift to ourselves, and we're giving a gift to them to stay, to shift, to transform, um, to learn through experiences. And they may or may not accept it. They may or may not like it. They may or may not change. But the reality of it is we're focused on our actions. What am I giving out? What am I presenting? What am I doing? And if we are presenting that compassion, we can never go wrong, actually, with that. We are always going to leave a favorable impression, even if they don't want to take it in at that point in time. And this is huge. And to realize we all make mistakes. It doesn't matter where we're on our path, how experienced we are with things in life, how much we've mastered things, or how many things we've mastered. We all make mistakes because we are in a third dimensional energy. We have days that we are not flowing well. We are not in alignment with things. We have days that we get triggered. And if we can keep that in mind, we also realize that other people are going to make mistakes, and we need to be forgiving of those mistakes. And the real key comes down to, how are they going to handle those mistakes? Are they going to accept that, hey, I've made a mistake, I want to correct it, I'm adjusting, I'm going on path, and I just need somebody to be a little patient and loving in that process. This is so important. We can't do things for other people. We can't live their life for them. We can't make the accomplishments for them, but we can love them through it. We can support them through it. We can be forgiving when they do make mistakes. And we can use those mistakes as a learning thing. And again, I mean, if somebody deliberately chooses to go down dark paths, that's a different thing. But if they are genuinely making mistakes and they keep learning from them and they keep trying, and they're trying to develop those spiritual pieces, and they're trying to honor the spiritual path, that's a learning process. And it is hard. And again, we need to come back and realize, do I have the ability to be there for what, so-and-so person today, because of where I'm at or not? And sometimes we cannot, and sometimes we can. And sometimes we can say, look, I understand this learning curve, but right now I've got to stop and deal with me. And that's not a selfish thing. And that's not a greedy thing. That's a self-care thing. So that is compassion in many ways. When we look at getting irritated and what getting irritated is about, and again, when we are irritated, it is a sign or a symbol in codes that we are out of balance. We're out of synchronicity. Not the other person so much, but we are out of balance. If we were in balance, we wouldn't feel that irritation. You see, so there's something in it that we are learning. There's something in it, again, they may be going through a lesson that was really hard for us, and that trigger is coming back up in us. But like, man, that was a really challenging point in my life, and that was a really hard lesson for me to learn. And I don't like that I'm seeing this now in somebody else. So, if somebody is irritated with you, that's another thing to consider as well. There may be a trigger there for them, and there may be a challenge there. There could be some pain there from their learning process of doing things. And again, learning from them, engage that learning process. And whether we are the one that's irritated or we are the one that is generating the so-called irritation, it's all about a learning process. Can you please help me? Can you please teach me? And sometimes people don't know that they're learning something. And again, that patience to come back to say, okay, This might be irritating me now, but if I implement the compassion, if I implement the patience, if I let this go and I bring it back to what am I giving out versus what am I taking in from this person? Now, now we're opening a different thing. Now we're coming into more of a humanitarian focus. Now we're coming more into other components. And also with this component, and I'm just kind of looking at my notes here, also with this component, um, the irritation deals with something being out of alignment. When people are irritating us, or an irritation comes up, and I had my notes here somewhere, sorry about that. It also is really this call to stop and refocus for a moment, to just refocus and say, okay, what needs to be forgiven in this space? What is feeling out of synchronicity for me? And why was this such an issue? And draw on our experiences instead of letting them be a trigger to us. Come back and say, wow, I remember when I was doing this. And again, we have to remember a lot of times when people are going through a learning process, they don't know that they need to learn something and they're not always receptive to learning it. So it is the patience, it's that letting go to say they've got to learn their lessons. Sometimes the kid has to fall off the bike and scrape their knees before they learn how to get that balance. And there isn't anybody that's going to tell them otherwise. Sometimes somebody's got to get a hanger over it before they realize, hey, it's not so great to drink that much. These can be some hard lessons along the way, and it can be hard to watch people take these things. But again, remembering that we are all in the learning process, and honoring that compassion. Difficulties is the interesting thing, because instead of getting irritated and angry and upset with somebody, what we want to try to do is to become supportive in the difficulties. And this is a big theme in September. And what are our difficulties or difficulty about in things? And the difficulties that we experience are really about showing us where we need to come into truth with things, where we need to come into integrity with things, where we might be manipulated by things. And that's not, I'm not going to say 100% that just because somebody is having difficulties that they're living in lies and deception, because we have challenging points and challenging energy currents that can make life difficulty. I have life patterns that deal with difficulties. It's not just a phase or a year or a month. It's in my life patterns. And so those difficulties are challenging us to come into the divine alignment and stand in that divine alignment regardless of the challenges that we face, regardless of the attacks people make, regardless of the things that they do that irritate us along the way. And I think that is another thing that we want to keep in mind with this. We all have difficulties going on. And it's not that one person's difficulties are worse or harder or more important than another person's difficulties. We all have difficulties. And yes, sometimes we can say, look, not having your favorite flavor in at your coffee shop is really not a true difficulty. But for some people, that could be the breaking straw that sets them into a PTSD attack. So it can be a difficulty. But, there are other people that have real difficulties, like they don't have a shelter, or a roof over their head, or family that they can go to take care of them if they hit hard times, or, they're not making enough money for food, or, there's all kinds of real world difficulties as well out there. And if we keep that in mind, and we realize that difficulties are an opportunity for those both that are irritated and those that are creating an irritation or are in the learning process, it's an opportunity to step into divine alignment. It's an opportunity to live in the light and to shine it. And that's what we do when we're in unconditional love and compassion and kindness, is we realize, hey, everybody's in difficulties. And what I'm seeing right now doesn't make somebody a pain in the ass. It means they're going through a hard time. What is irritating me, what is rough, what is coming out maybe not right, is somebody in hard times. And it's up to me to hold the compassion. It's up to me to hold some kindness in that space, even if what I'm getting back doesn't feel so great. Because again, it's about what am I putting out instead of being pulled into the distraction of the space that they're in. And when we look at this and we become supportive, what are we doing? When we become supportive, we are literally taking command of the situation. We are literally coming into, through support, removing the lies that might be around something. And that's kind of like that timely person that you're having a rough day and you go in and they say, you know what, honey, we all have rough days. We all have rough days. It's going to pass. You'll get through it. And you will find the strength to carry on. And you know what? You'll be okay on your own. And these are the things that support gives command back. It reminds somebody, yeah, I don't have to turn my power over. You're taking your power back from something that is sucking your power out of you. You are giving somebody their power back where they've lost it. And then forgiving the mistakes. When we look at that forgive piece is right in line with that. It's about taking command of the situation. So when we offer up that forgiveness, when we forgive the mistakes that somebody makes and realize this is a genuine mistake. It's not a pattern, it's a mistake. Now, if they do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again for a long duration of time, well, that's a pattern. That's a different story. But hey, if they do it once or twice or periodically, it's just a mistake. It's just a rough day. And when we implement that forgiveness, when we bring that into the picture, we now are putting an end to the situation taking control over us, or being in those victim spaces, or having our power turned over to the situation. And we now take it back and go, okay, now I can come back into this alignment and I can turn it around and I can move forward. Doesn't mean that it's easy, but I can move forward. And again, that forgiveness gives somebody their power back. It allows them to realize that they can take care of themselves. But it's okay. It's okay. When we hold back on forgiveness, that's actually a form of control. That is us trying to control people or situations. Saying, no, I'm only going to issue forgiveness if you do what I want you to do. That's control. That's power. So it's very interesting when we start to delve into this. Now, our key in September, one of the things that we want to stay focused on is what gives us peace. And that all ties in, right? Because if we're being consumed with these things that we consider to irritate us, we're disrupting our peace and our harmony. And what happens with that? Our peace is literally divine connection. So if we become absorbed by an irritation, if we allow ourselves to be absorbed by people and situations outside of ourselves, and we're unwilling to implement compassion into those situations, we are literally disconnecting from source, from divine source, from God. We are disconnecting that. And there's no way we can have peace when we do that. So in order to get peace, we have to come into that divine connection. We have to come into being connected to divine source, to God. And when we do that, peace will naturally flow. So we want to think about, well, what brings peace to the situation? What invites divine presence in? We need to invite divine presence in. We need to invite God into the situation and say, give me the strength to have compassion. Give me the strength to forgive. in this situation. Give me the strength to have the patience to allow this person to learn, so on and so forth. Let me be a source of support as opposed to a source of conflict. Now what we're doing is we're focusing on what gives peace long term. And again, even if they don't accept something, the fact that we give it out, that we hold that space, we receive peace from that, because that's what we're giving out. That's, we're focused on our actions. And so I hope this helps you guys out a bit. I hope this sheds some light on some things. And you know, the key is, again, holding that peace, holding that unconditional love, holding that compassion. And when we stand in that space, the things that once used to irritate us won't irritate us anymore. The things that we are challenged by, we won't be challenged by. And no matter how far we grow, there are going to be times that we're going to feel irritated by people, or something that somebody does irritates us. But if we come back into that compassion, if we come back into that soul self, if we come back into realizing the state we're in and saying, yeah, it's really not about that person. It's about the space I'm holding. It's about the space that I'm in. It's about the tensions I'm feeling. Everything shifts. Everything shifts. And when we start to realize these things, so many of the things that are challenging in our world is, yeah, maybe some of them are evil, to a certain extent, but then there's also the aspect of, as Christ once say, forgive them, they do not know what they've done. And this is true, because people that go down a lot of different dark paths don't really know what they're doing. And that's not, hey, I'm better than somebody else. It's just they're really not seeing it. It's like not being able to see the consequences of something that somebody is choosing. And sometimes they're going to have some hard consequences because that's what's going to teach them. So we can all sympathize with the hardships. We all go through them. And realizing, we don't have to do, again, we don't have to do everything for everybody. All we have to do is hold the love. All we have to do is put the love out there and then let it go. I know it's not always easy. Life isn't always easy. But when we keep these things in mind and we bring these reminders up and we bring this area of focus up, and we maybe go back and listen to a video like this, or we share it out with other people and say, hey, I know you're going through these irritations and stuff. Maybe check this video out, give it a like, support the channel. That's what helps people like me be able to help more people. That's what helps us to get seen. And it does make a difference. And it does remind us, no matter where we're going, because sometimes we go down those spirals, right? And we need those little reminders to reel us back in and go, okay, yeah, you're right. You're right. I just need to have a little love, and it's hard to watch, and I don't like watching it, but you're right. I'm going to hold the compassion, and I'm going to be there. And so, anyways, I do hope this helps, and I do hope it makes a difference for you. And I do hope it's a great reminder for those of you that already know this, and that it brings it down, because these are the things that change our world. Take care, everybody. Don't forget, again, check out the book, The Code Journey. 2024 is out. Go on the website, compassioncodes.com. Check it out. The links are directly there. Media tab will get you there. There's also some stores around the US that you can purchase it in person if you're near any of those stores. Check them out. Support them. I love supporting local businesses. And I hope you all have a great month, and I'll see you at the end of September.